Somebody like you doesn't get to be a world champion.
On September 2nd, 2002, the then Raw general manager Eric Bischoff introduced to the WWE fandom the World Heavyweight Championship, and then simply handed it to Triple H. It began a 2.5-year or 944-day reign of what many have called the Reign of Terror. Yeah, at one point Triple H was called Terrorizing, so yeah, it's a deep cut for hardcore fans. Why was it considered one of the most questionable areas for the Raw brand? We'll get into it. It had 5 title reigns and speculated barriers of other stars. Depending on who you talk to, they all fell under the heavy hammer of the game. And some fans simply don't look back fondly at this time for the Red brand. Let's go back to 2002. WWE was really splitting the brands between Raw and SmackDown after the first WWE draft that saw Lesnar being drafted to Raw, and then SmackDown general manager Stephanie McMahon revealing that after SummerSlam, the newly crowned WWE champion Brock would be appearing over on the blue brand SmackDown. With no world champion on Raw, Eric Bischoff reintroduced, essentially, the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. It was the exact same design, but began a new lineage, starting with Triple H, who was simply handed the title. What? Rob Van Dam, who was red hot at the time and the Intercontinental Champion, pinned Triple H in the main event of that same night of Monday Night Raw. And he was awarded the title when teaming with Ric Flair against The Game and Triple H. It instantly set up Triple H's first world title challenger, and their title match at Unforgiven was confirmed after RVD won a fatal 4-way number 1 contenders match. H then first retaliated at RVD by costing him the IC title in a match against Chris Jericho. It made a lot of sense at the time. Get the IC title off of RVD onto someone who was legitimate and use that momentum to drive him up to the next level of his first world title, which, in case you forgot, he was completely ready for at the time. A lot of fans were doing the whole RVD point it yourself thing. So the logical decision would be to have Rob Van Dam become the highly sought-after new World Heavyweight Champion at Unforgiven, right? Wrong. Triple H simply retained in an underwhelming match, depending on who you talk to, squashing RVD's momentum, and doing this would be the defining theme of the Reign of Terror. After that, he moved on to his next challenger, the Big Red Machine, Kane, which was unfortunately led to the dreaded and hated and most despised segment possibly in the history of WWE. Yeah, we're gonna skip that whole thing, but what was notable was the fact that their match led to the unification of the World Heavyweight Championship and the IC title. Why were we getting rid of this? Did you forget that ever happened? We don't blame you, but did we mention that Chris Jericho became the Intercontinental Champion? Yeah, well, after Eazy-E announced the unification plans, there was this little tournament to set up where Triple H could overcome Bubba Ray Dudley while Jericho had to defend his title against Kane. Triple H was successful and Jericho wasn't, leading to a match at No Mercy where the Game won. WWE quickly tried to distance themselves from that entire thing with Katie Vick, yeah, I'm sorry I brought her name up, and just simply move on to the good guys chasing this bad guy champion. Triple H put a big target on his chest with that World Heavyweight Championship, and someone had personal motivation to return from injury and take him out. Shawn Michaels had come back at that year's SummerSlam in August, and now Triple H was the world champion. So Shawn wanted that belt, and he wanted to take it from his former friend, winning the first ever brutal and game-changing Elimination Chamber at Survivor Series. That's right, Triple H lost the title, but it wouldn't be for long. Unfortunately, this little revenge chapter for Shawn Michaels was his only world title reign in the second half of his WWE career, and he would lose the title back to Triple H in a brutally violent 3 stages of hell match at Armageddon, meaning that Triple H would close out the year as the world champion again. His next feud was against Scott Steiner, who had only signed with WWE a few months earlier with a lot of hype. The peak of his feud was when they had a pose-off on Monday Night Raw. That's right, a pose-off as part of a World Championship feud. What is this, the 80s? Once again, there was no payoff with Steiner, only winning the Royal Rumble match by DQ. And the entire Steiner debacle is a story in and of itself. But the only reason he was on Raw and not SmackDown was because Stephanie McMahon rejected his advances. Yeah, talk about weird. The match between Steiner and Trips was at the Rumble so bad that some accused Triple H of sabotaging the match to make the ex-WCW star Steiner look bad. Yeah, if you got into the message boards, yes, message boards on the internet, people were saying that. Jim Ross had to shut those rumors down by saying Triple H is not going to go out there and have a stinker on purpose. No, it's going to sound bad. He's a professional. His ego, and I say that in a good way, he's got a lot of pride. He's not going to go out there and stink up the joint on purpose. The highlight of this 2-year reign of terror from Triple H was the formation of the faction Evolution in February, which is perhaps the highlight of this entire thing because it created a faction that would ultimately have a combined 50 world titles among its 4 members. An insane stat when you think about it, and it's also a bad guy faction in WWE that is still fondly remembered, with Ric Flair, Randy Orton, and Batista at Triple H's side. But we're getting a little bit too positive. We can't do that on the wrestling internet channels. No, the absolute worst of the reign of terror came at WrestleMania 19, when the rising Booker T emerged as one of the strongest holdovers from WCW, now in WWE, as Triple H's challenger. Booker T was already an established five-time, I don't have to say the whole thing. He was a 5-time world champion in WCW. But it was a little bit of a different ballgame in WWE, especially at their own Super Bowl of shows. They say the cream always rises to the top, and Booker T may have tried to spinny-around his way into a world title, but this was Triple H in 2002, and he decided to heel it up in the worst way possible by using lines in the build-up to the match that had a very clear racial undertone. It is likely it would have been forgiven if Booker T had his moment at WrestleMania, but he didn't get to have that moment. But instead, we got possibly one of the worst finishes in the eyes of some with WrestleMania history when Triple H hit a pedigree and crawled out to a successful cover to beat Booker. WWE Hall of Famer now, Booker T has reflected on what happened at WrestleMania 19 and said that while he doesn't lose sleep over it, he admitted on his podcast that it could have changed his life. It was a night that literally could have changed my life in so many different ways. It could have shut up all the critics and naysayers who said it would have never happened. There was a built-in story there as well. So many office guys said, "Book, you should have won, man. You should have won." Triple H was now getting recognition as the most despised man in all of the WWE, who used every shortcut, every mind game that at this point fans felt the line between the cerebral assassin in the ring and on TV was also a backstage politician who had secured his spot in some real-life nefarious faction. Fans were letting speculation become a false reality. Whether or not it's true is up for debate, but Triple H's power trip continued. Raw got a breath of fresh air in the form of the debuting Goldberg. Yes, a holdover that didn't come over from WCW in the invasion angle with WWE, but he would only meet Triple H a few months later. After WrestleMania, Triple H would soon begin a program with another old Clique member in Kevin Nash, who returned and tried to reunite with the Game and Shawn Michaels, only for Triple H to reject the idea. While their first in-ring encounter at the time in a 6-man tag team match at Backlash, where Triple H, Ric Flair, and Jericho defeated Shawn Michaels, Booker T, and Nash, Big Daddy Cool eventually made his way to the world title contendership picture, leading to a trilogy of matches at Judgment Day, Insurrection, and Bad Blood. While Nash first beat Triple H by DQ at Judgment Day, he lost to him in a street fight at Insurrection, and then a Hell in a Cell match at Bad Blood to end their program for good. Nash would remain in the world title picture into SummerSlam, and he wasn't alone. The second Elimination Chamber was booked for that event, with Triple H defending the world title against Nash, Jericho, Orton, Shawn Michaels, and Goldberg. But that chamber match was the Goldberg show. After Nash was the first eliminated by Jericho, Goldberg went on to a tear and eliminated Orton, Michaels, and Jericho all in just 3 minutes, setting himself up to be the guy to be easy pickings of the game. But Triple H entered last and used his sledgehammer to retain the title. It wasn't looked at as the right decision, but in a way, it was still okay because it did enough to establish Goldberg as the next guy who could take the belt from Triple H. Thankfully, WWE pulled the trigger, temporarily satisfying those angry fans who were sick of Triple H having his game with the big gold belt, and the big gold belt went back to someone who had it originally back in WCW, Goldberg. But Goldberg's short first run in WWE had this world title run, which was plagued with some booking issues and what Goldberg himself has considered a character sabotage. They would feud for the rest of 2003, with Goldberg retaining against Triple H at Survivor Series, but losing it back at Armageddon in a triple threat match that also involved Kane. Armageddon led to the peak of Evolution's power in WWE. Randy Orton was the Intercontinental Champion, and Ric Flair and Batista were the World Tag Team Champions. After running back his feud against Shawn Michaels, their match at Royal Rumble ended in a double countout in a brutal last man standing match, in what was probably one of the best title matches that Triple H had during this time. Chris Benoit won the Royal Rumble match that night and challenged Triple H for the World Heavyweight title, and the newly crowned WWE Champion Eddie Guerrero was going up against Kurt Angle at WrestleMania 20 in Madison Square Garden. Some fans saw this as a sea change, a new elevation of 2 stars that could potentially leave Mania as the new top guys. Was Triple H going to let that happen, though? In hindsight, adding Shawn Michaels to the World Heavyweight title match at WrestleMania turned out to be a stroke of genius, leading to an incredible main event at MSG where Benoit submitted Triple H to become the new world champ. I remember watching this match live and cheering at the TV with all my friends at the pay-per-view party. Tap, 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 and when he tapped, the reign of terror may have ended. Oh boy, oh wow, yes, it was one of the most beautiful moments in WWE history, which saw Benoit and Guerrero embracing in the ring as longtime friends who were indeed at the top of the wrestling mountain. The following month at Backlash in Canada, yes, Benoit's home country, he retained the world title in a WrestleMania 20 rematch, this time making Shawn Michaels tap out. Benoit would have a 5-month reign as champion before dropping the title to Randy Orton at SummerSlam 2004, making the Viper the youngest world champion in WWE history at the time, at just 24 years, 4 months, and 20 days, a record that still stands nearly 2 decades later. But it was simply too long for Triple H not to be around the world title. That's right, he turned on his Evolution protege Randy Orton due to his jealousy. While it would have made for a perfect match to cement Randy Orton as WWE's next top guy, Tripp simply defeated him a month later at Unforgiven. This had arguably the biggest consequences, bigger than the Booker T issue, because WWE was seemingly pushing Orton to become the next face of the company and not John Cena. While Cena turned out to be the right choice in retrospect, the feud did a lot to damage Orton's momentum and completely squashed a potential hot babyface run. Though some have said the things that happened with Randy Orton outside of the ring may have also contributed to this simple backstep in his career. Having won the World Heavyweight title for the 4th time in 741 days, Triple H had a successful title defense against Shawn Michaels at Taboo Tuesday and lost to the team of Randy Orton at Survivor Series, allowing him and his teammates Benoit, Jericho, and Maven to take control of Raw for the coming month. 15 days after that, Triple H had to vacate the World Heavyweight title after both Benoit and Edge pinned him simultaneously in a title match. Surely that left the door open for someone fresh to win the title. No, it didn't. Wrong. Yeah, wrong. WWE set up another Elimination Chamber match at New Year's Revolution in early 2005. Triple H beat his fellow Evolution member, Batista, Chris Jericho, Benoit, Edge, and Randy Orton to become a 5-time heavyweight champion and an overall 10-time world champion. It's worth mentioning that before this big match, Randy Orton warned Batista of Triple H's treacherous ways. Although Batista appeared to be just unaware of it, he wasn't. There was a slow-burning build-up going on for a few months, starting with Triple H verbally abusing him for losing to Jericho. As the Animal's character began to slowly develop and gain independence, the prospect of him versus the game was something that fans were beginning to chatter about. And each week, you could see it getting to that, louder and louder. While the sledgehammering slime ball that was Triple H retained the World Heavyweight title against Orton to finish their feud for good, Batista won the Rumble the same night after eliminating John Cena in one of the most botched finishes that's also memorable. Remember? Triple H was quivering in his boots again. The insecurity immediately rose to the surface, and so did his plot to manipulate Batista before WrestleMania. Yes, Batista had a choice, but hopefully you could just, go over to SmackDown and chase WWE Champion JBL, and I'll keep my belt over here, buddy. Yeah, that was the plan. He even set in a fake hit and run to somehow prompt Batista to go after JBL, but the Animal actually overheard Triple H fully cementing his plot, and Batista had his motivation. And possibly one of the best moments during this time, the Reign of Terror, saw a big choice made by Batista for WrestleMania, turning the tables on Triple H with the mind games, his iconic thumbs up to thumbs down, before sending him crashing through a table. With Evolution done and dusted, Batista powerbombed his way into the top echelon of WWE, ending Triple H's reign of terror when he dethroned him for the WWE World Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania 21 in the main event, winning in triumphant fashion the same night that John Cena also did. He went on to face him twice in the subsequent pay-per-views, losing both times and fully establishing Batista as WWE's next real top main event star. But wait, we keep mentioning these burials, yeah, that hot topic, and bad matches. So didn't it end well when it was supposed to be such a bad thing? Yeah, the Reign of Terror ultimately did benefit Batista. And when looking back at the bigger picture, the entire story was filled with superstars having their moment simply squashed by a villain that fans hated and fans wanted to see chased into big title matches. While none of it had as bad a feeling as Booker T and Randy Orton being robbed of what felt like a young superstar getting a crowning achievement, a story of that magnitude needed a little bit more time to it, right? Not to mention the fact that it didn't really do much for Triple H's legacy as a wrestler. A modern-day example of this is the Bloodline story, which has seen Roman Reigns pivot himself as the top guy in all of WWE with an entire faction around him, burying different people who step up to him who feel like they could indeed beat him, but somehow some last-minute scheme allows him to get out of it while he simply wears a confident smile that makes him feel like he deserves to be champion when he probably doesn't. Yeah, doesn't this feel like Triple H 20 years ago? Yeah, next time you see anyone tweet "lol Roman wins" on Twitter, remind them that it could have been a lot like the Triple H stuff from the early 2000s, which wasn't as good as the entire Bloodline thing, right? Depending on who you talk to. Get in the comments, tell me I'm wrong. What did you think of Triple H's Reign of Terror? Was it the worst thing that people say it is, or is it unfairly criticized? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Or check out videos like this from